He showed up at the store days after he was released from prison after serving 12 years for fraud. The man was one of her husband's long-lost relatives. At first he tried to convince the man to meet somewhere else so they could talk, but the man had other plans. Knowing their past, he doesn't want his wife to see his relatives, at least not yet, but there's more to it. He didn't want him in the store at that time. It is said that every family has its secrets. Some hide scandals while others hide the truth about the source of family wealth. For the McAllister family, the secret would prove beyond Alicia McAllister's control. It would bring her to tears in front of her husband and long-lost cousin. Alicia McAllister was born Alicia Humboldt. She was a 29-year-old mother with her husband Kenny and 2-year-old son. Brett lives in North Carolina, and Alicia, who graduated from Duke University with a degree in botany, has always devoted her life to two things: work and family. She strives to find the perfect balance between the two and is proud of her life's achievements. Alicia and her husband Kenny had been dating for nearly a decade before he proposed. The two met in college as friends who became best friends and eventually lovers. Considering how long they've been together, Alicia is convinced she knows everything about Kenny. She knew nothing of the secret he and his family were keeping from her. For most people in the world, finding the perfect soulmate is a stroke of luck. When a person finds the right person, everything else pales in comparison. However, it can also blind them to their partner's faults and unconsciously cultivate some undesirable traits. Something similar will happen to Alicia. She didn't find out too late what was really happening under her nose. Alicia and her family are living the good life in a small coastal town in North Carolina. Alicia works as a wildlife consultant for marine plants in the area, and Kenny runs a machine shop in town. Despite Kenny's enthusiasm for his business, Alicia admits it hasn't been as successful as they'd hoped. This is not entirely surprising given the global pandemic that was sweeping the world at the time. Like any loving wife, Alicia supported her husband through a difficult time in his business. And when she left, she didn't know what was going on in the store. Many criminal activities often use cash-based businesses as a front for extortion. The penalty for such acts is up to 25,000 美元 and up to 20 years in prison for each fraud count. For Kenny, his cash-run auto shop was an unwitting hotspot for someone carrying out illegal activities. He had no idea that someone from his past would soon force him to reveal what was going on. That man turned out to be Kenny's long-lost relative Derek. Derek showed up at Kenny's a few days after he was released from a 12-year sentence for fraud. Knowing Derek's past, Kenny doesn't want his wife to see him, at least not yet. He also didn't want Derek in the store at that particular moment. At first, he asked Derek to meet somewhere else so they could talk, but Derek had other plans. Alicia walks in and Derek starts talking about what happened 12 years ago, right before he went to prison. Derek looks older even though he is the same age. He had a bushy beard and a muscular body covered in tattoos. He had been in prison thinking about what had happened to Kenny before the police surrounded them. Just then Alicia walked in. Alicia took a break from work and parked her car at the store. She was ready for a break after a day of filing papers and studying animal cell samples. She usually spends the morning in town with friends before returning to the office. But today is different. Alicia had this feeling that she needed to see Derek that made her nervous, as if something terrible had happened. She was attracted to Kenny's store even though she didn't fully understand what was going on, you know. As a spiritual woman, Alicia never believed in coincidences. She believes that everything happens for a reason. The thought of seeing her husband kept her butterflies in her stomach all morning. She can't explain what happened except that something brought her to Kenny's shop. She didn't know what she was going to find there. Alicia parked in the driveway of the store and hurried out onto the cold tarmac. But when she went to see Kenny, something caught her eye. What caught her attention was an old charger that was too good to just sit there without its owner. Though Alicia doesn't doubt that her husband could attract customers with a car like this, but she couldn't shake a terrible feeling. She put that feeling aside and went to the car to have a look. From a distance it looked new, but Alicia realized it wasn't, standing close. It's got some cracks in the paint and dents all over the front. The leather seats are worn out and the steering wheel seems dated. Looking at the car, one thing became clear. Alicia realized something while studying the car. Not only is it an antique car, most of the original parts are still intact. And it was a taxi. It even has the dealer's information in case the car is lost or impounded. After her careful examination of the warhorse lasted 5 minutes, Alicia took a step back and turned to her husband's office. The pain that had immediately brought her here flashed through her body again. She stifled her cries and straightened up to find out if she was not feeling well. But she knew she needed to be back at work in less than an hour, so she hurried to the door. Alicia pushed open the door and walked into the garage area of the store. But something is wrong. Her husband usually leaves the doors and windows open to flood the room with natural light. Today, however, he closed every door and turned off the radio, which usually plays soft country music here. What's going on, Kenny? Alicia shouted as she walked over to a window and pushed it open, frowning. The light penetrates the space and illuminates the grimy garage. But Kenny was nowhere to be found and Alicia couldn't understand. Her husband seldom closes the door during the day. She was about to call him when she heard a noise from the back of the house. Alicia followed the low, deep voices into the store. 2 people were talking. One of them was her husband. She didn't know what to think, but she knew she'd support Kenny no matter what, you know. If he was in trouble, she'd be there for him like any soulmate. If he was in trouble, she'd be there for him like any soulmate. Kenny is still trying to convince Eric to have lunch with him somewhere else. Just then Alicia walked in. Her eyes darted around the room past Derek and settled on Kenny. She smiled and tilted her head a little as if to ask Kenny what happened. When Kenny didn't answer, she stepped forward and fully saw the tall man who was talking to him. Hello, Alicia greeted the burly man who was talking to her husband. She examined the man as closely as she could, like a warhorse outside. You know everything in seconds. At first she thought he was one of his customers who had come to discuss something vehicle-related. But when she took him inside, she saw something more sinister. Alicia had heard stories of crimes in cash transactions. She knew that people had faced this problem before and she prayed that she and her husband would not repeat it. Yet the man in front of her looked like someone who had made a fortune in such shady deals. Alicia didn't want to profile him that way, but her brain was already overanalyzing everything about this man. He was a tall man with a rough face and a bruised beard. Dark tattoos covered his temples up to his neck, chest, and arms. Every muscle in his body was contracting. She doesn't know what's going on, but she has to deal with it with her husband. It's too late to leave now. The tall man held out his hand to her with a twisted smile and Alicia shook it quickly. The Derek guy actually introduced himself but his smile broke out. Alicia, I suppose. His voice was hoarse but there was a tenderness in it that Alicia could not explain. She just nodded at his question and forced a smile to dissipate the awkwardness of sipping into the garage. Seeing the smile on the man's face, Alicia introduced herself. She explained that she had taken a break from work to see Annie and didn't mind taking them to lunch. He introduced himself and talked about his relationship with Kenny, and why has Alicia ever met him even though his family. He opened up about why he was sentenced to 12 years in prison and what Kenny did before the police found them. It's a secret that will make Alicia and still and shake. I ran some legal business that went wrong, Derek said. I was badly wounded and I would have died if my cousin hadn't opened the door for me and dressed my wound. Seeing this secret shocked Alicia as he continued to tell the story, revealing more information. Let the woman walk to her husband with shining eyes. Derek said his cousin convinced him to turn himself in after spending a few hours at Kenny's house. The way he talked about Kenny as the reason he chose to turn over a New Jersey brought Alicia to tears. She hugged Kenny tightly and kissed him on the cheek. But Kenny said he was keeping a secret from Alicia, too. Kenny revealed what he was doing behind his wife's back. He's been secretly working on that abandoned Shelby mainly because it used to be Derek's old car. He wanted to surprise Eric when he got home. He revealed that he'd been keeping it a secret for more than 6 months, fixing cars every chance he got. Alicia's tears doubled as she hugged him again. In a world where some people never find their soulmate, she was not only loyal to her but selfless in every way. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch our videos. If you like our content, please don't forget to subscribe and like. It will support us to continue to create more great content.